Hello and welcome to the Teaching Through Change podcast. I am Jacob Fisher, and today I'm here with Don Cannamela, or as I called him for many, many years, Mr. C.
Hello there.
How are we doing today?
Pretty well, thank you.
Good. That is good. So today, what we are going to be talking about is, as the name suggests, teaching through change. Mainly for you, not so much for me. Because you have been teaching slightly longer than me.
Couple of years.
Why don't you start with that? How you started teaching, how long you've been teaching, a little background about yourself.
Sure. Been teaching for 29 years. The past 27 of those have been in the itty-bitty Parrishville Hopkinton School District, where I am the 5 through 12 band director, and I also am the technical director for the musical, and for a long time ran the school website and still handle a lot of tech needs around the building.
Yeah. I remember when I was here being wowed by how much stuff you did, and then I became a teacher here myself, and I found out just how much you did. It's a lot.
Yep. Yeah. But I enjoy it, and I think it's something that the kids have certainly grown with, and they are all digital natives now. They weren't when I first started, so it's interesting to see that.
Yeah. Speaking of when you first started, so back when you first started, what types of technology were present in the school then when you started?
Gosh, the internet was still in its early days, if you can imagine that. I mean, we did have internet and email, but it was pretty basic. CDs were still the medium of choice for most things. MP3s were just starting to happen. The good old Napster days for those of us that are my age who remember those kinds of things, and file sharing and torrenting. So yeah, that was the biggest thing was CDs. I'm, being a musician, do a lot in the audio world. So that's probably the biggest one. I remember our first music tech classes was learning how to rip a CD, because that was an essential skill back in the day that I bet most kids couldn't do right now. So yeah.
Probably not. I remember, I'm old enough to, I ripped a couple CDs myself, and it was all legal music for sure.
There you go.
So I know you mentioned students now not being able to probably rip a CD, but how did the students then interact with the ideas of using technology?
I think they were pretty good with it. Certainly the gaming world was big back then, and with the internet coming on the way it was, people were moving into it soon. We didn't have every kid with a Chromebook. We had a couple of computer labs throughout the building that had big honking desktops on them with Windows 95 or 98 or whatever we had on them back then. And that was the basics.
Yeah. Now kids, whenever they see Chromebook, they throw it, as we just found out. Apparently they throw them.
Yeah.
But they don't really appreciate the technology, I'm sure, as much as, like, if you were in the computer lab. I was old enough to have had a computer lab with Mr. Scott Lalone. He was
There you go.
But you really thought it was cool when you got to go to the computer lab. You had computers class. Now I feel like the kids have them with them all the time. They kind of take that for granted a little bit.
Yeah. Cell phones were almost non-existent. And over the first few years, the most you would get is a flip phone would be the highlight of your day. Or one of the Nokia candy bar phones that you can drive a truck over. So you would do some T9 texting, for those of you who remember what that was. And that was about it. Maybe send a picture. And now every single kid has the entire internet in their pocket and access to incredible resources with their phones and with their laptops and everything else they have it.
Yeah, and great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah,
they definitely abuse that power of having all the information at their fingertips.
This is true.
Something that I've noticed a lot is that they don't look up the stuff they need to look up, though.
Right.
They're looking up the nonsense information rather than looking up like important things.
Yeah, I think their digital literacy and their media literacy is really lacking, especially now, as we move into the AI world. That's where you're really going to have to learn how to be a discerning person and suss out what's true and what's not, and use your own facts, not your own facts, but facts that are backed up by reputable sources. they go out and Google search and find some random article by some random person who thinks they're an expert on some field, and they, cite some wacky idea that this person has as a fact or a theory. And, you really need to work on your source cultivation, and be a little more discerning with that.
Yeah, that was a class that was taught. It was taught in computers, was how to find a source and use a source. And I think the problem probably is that you see second graders who have phones or access
Right.
to like, they're not being taught those basic digital literacy skills. They get handed a phone and they do whatever they want. Like when I got a phone, I was 15 because we went on that New York City trip together.
Yeah,
That's
right.
why I had a phone, because I was going on the New York City music trip. But I was taught all these things you should do with a phone, all the things you shouldn't do with a phone. And now I don't think that happens probably as much because it's such a staple of someone having it and not needing to be taught. They kind of see everyone with phones. They just do whatever they kind of can with it.
Right. And they share their lives online. I try and tell them, don't put anything online that you wouldn't want your spouse, your boss, your grandmother, your parent, your sibling, or your best friend to read, because they're very happy to just kind of live their lives online, and those things don't go away.
Yep. And I've noticed as I've gotten older the draw of living your life online, because you can connect with people from more of a distance, but at the same time, it's very nice to keep certain things about yourself private. And the kids, they don't really understand that as much.
No.
But moving away from the kids, if we flash back to when you first started, educators, how were they viewing technology?
There was definitely a divide between, I think I was of the first sort of generation to embrace it. The older people definitely were very slow with it and had trouble. You spoke of Mr. Lalonde. I used to help him out around here with the tech stuff, and how do I print? How do I, where did I save a file? How do I download an email attachment? Those are all, the super basic things. You'd have to teach that to the teachers. I remember I was the one that brought in Google Apps for Education. They called it back in the day. I think it might still be called something like that. And for our district, and we started using it with the teachers for the first few years. And I used to have workshops with teachers on, how to use a calendar, how to use email, how to use Google Docs online. That was a whole new world, because before that you had your document on Microsoft Word, and you probably had 6 different versions of it saved in 6 different locations on 3 different machines. And the only way to get it from place to place was to email it to yourself, or sneaker net it, on a floppy disk, or burn it onto a CDRW. If you remember CDRWs, where you could rewrite a CD. Whoa, that was crazy. Yeah. So that's what I remember having, like, version control was always an issue with sort of documents that lived like that. Now that they're in the cloud and you sort of have one source of truth with those, I think things are a lot easier to manage that way.
Well, I remember,
and autosave.
yeah, autosave is incredible. That is something that's great. Well, my mom is also a teacher, and I remember her, like you said, 6 different copies of the same thing in a bunch of different ways, all that. But
Yep.
I remember when she got it on Google Docs, I had to show her how to, like, get things going. But now she's much more organized in where she has things.
Yeah.
So you kind of already answered this, but was it seen as essential or experimental, that being technology? And then in what ways was it essential already, some of those things?
I don't think anything was really essential when I first started. I think it was starting to become necessary. Um, Starting with, like, card catalogs for the library, I think was maybe one of the early ones, where we have the databases online where you could find stuff. Or I remember having, you would get, like, CDs of encyclopedias. Yeah, that was how you did it, because you wouldn't go online and actually search that. This is, but that was one of the big things with getting started with that and I think I embraced it. I always tried to embrace it. I found tools that worked for me. Um, and I found, uses for those tools. I still remember back when I was in college, I had a friend of mine who was working in the computer science department at the University of Buffalo. This was probably the late 80s. And he was working on this special project for the post office as like an internship where they were trying to learn to teach computers to read addresses on envelopes, which now seems probably basic for the post office, but they were first working that out. And he showed me this amazing thing called the World Wide Web in a web browser with hyperlinks. And my mind was completely blown, and of course it was all text. Maybe there was a picture here and there. And he was on these $10,000 computers in this special computer lab to be able to access this network back then. But yeah, and then went beyond that to text-based terminals. I remember at the University of Buffalo, you would sit down at a terminal and you could sign in, and everything was just green text on the black background. But there were bulletin boards that you would go to. We called them back then. You'd call them chat rooms now, I guess, or something, where you could share information. This was the Reddit of the day. But I remember reading a lot of bulletin board chat rooms to kind of keep up on what's going around the world. So yeah, I was always an early adopter, and I still am, I think. And once I find tools that I like to stick with them. And yeah.
Well, I mean, finding tools that you like and sticking with them is super important because you get to know them. We had a conversation an hour ago about tools that we had found that we stuck with.
Yep.
Where it's just essential, because if you're just going to be getting stuff and then switching, you can't actually ever master what you're working on.
Yeah.
And I would say you're definitely still someone who is like, maybe not an innovator, but ahead of the curve in when applying tech wise. I mean, the school musical that we're doing right now, like I helped a little bit.
You helped a lot. You're doing the lighting and I'm doing the sound. Yep.
But you just set up, like, we have Miss Sinclair, who is in a back room not being able to see the stage, and you decided to set up a stream where she can see what's happening on stage so she can read her lines. Like, that's not something any musical I've worked on before ever thought of with someone off stage. Like, they just
it works well
or time it. So,
and actually we're just using a Google Meet to we have OBS on our I have a streaming rig up at the booth, and I have OBS running on that, and I have feeding a video feed to a Google Meet, and then we have a Google Meet, a laptop backstage running Google Meet, and that's how she's watching. And the lag is only about a half a second, so it's usable for the show. But
close enough.
Yeah, I've always tried. I think what really got me into tech was hating some of the paper forms that we had here. So the thing that I did web development on my own for a lot of years, and what really started that was, I don't know if you remember this from back in the day, but we used to have to do these things called sports rubrics. Where every Friday you had to fill out these forms in triplicate of all the students that were struggling in a class that were in a sport. Every teacher had to fill these out every single Friday. So the end of the day Friday, and now you've got 20 of these forms to fill out. And then they're all handwritten. There's no electronic version. And it's, every one of them, you got to write your name, what class, the kid's name, what period, what this. And then there's all these different categories that you had to rate them in. And then you had to leave comments as well. And this just took so long. And I for years, first couple of years, thought there's got to be an easier way to do this. And that's how I started getting into first website development, which I took a class about web development. And I still remember asking the teacher, like, how I would implement this through web forms. And, making a web form is easy, but getting the back end database was where the real rubber met the road. And that's where I really had to go a lot deeper. And that started teaching myself PHP to learn how to code, and ended up writing the first website that we did here at school in PHP, and having a rubrics page that teachers could go to, and it, pre-filled the student, pre-filled them. They could choose which students needed their form done. It would pop up a form. It would show you the forms that you've done for the past couple of weeks, and then they could check it off and resubmit it. And that seemed to work really well. And then I created a separate page for the secretaries where they could generate a report for all the kids. And that took a long time and kind of went through a lot of iterations of development. But that was kind of my first real deep dive into tech stuff, and it was purely out of laziness.
So then in pure laziness, you went and created an entire website.
Yes, right.
So depends on where you want to be lazy.
That's right. Yeah. Well, good coders always say, and I don't consider myself a coder or even a good one, but never repeat yourself. So yeah, learning how to, do dynamic web pages and replaceable code and things like that was just like a game changer.
Yeah. I forgot about those sports rubrics. I never had them. I was never on them, but those were paper for a long time.
They were, yeah.
Because they were still paper when I was doing sports, which was long ago, but not that long ago. So what kind of motivated you to pursue the EdTech specialist degree?
Laziness.
Yeah.
No. Actually, when I was starting as my grad work and I was a Crane student, music ed student, but a lot of the grad level music ed courses did not really interest me a lot, and so I went through and read the manuals and handbooks at the school and figured out that I could take a few courses in the regular ed department, and that included the IT ed department back at the time. And so I took a lot of classes with that. So to do my music ed masters, I probably took half music ed courses and half tech ed courses. And there were better options in the summer too for tech ed courses. And that was mainly when I was doing it because I was teaching at the time. And so I ended up getting my music ed degree and with a lot of those courses. And then I also realized that you can apply courses there's a certain number you could apply to different masters. So when I had a child a few years into teaching, and we weren't real happy with the childcare situation in Potsdam, but we heard real good things about the SUNY Potsdam childcare program that they had there. And we applied to have my son go there, and there was more than a year waiting list. And they said, but students get priority, so that's why there's this waiting list. And a little light bulb went off in my head and said, well, I can be a student. I'm already halfway to getting the ed tech specialist degree, and that's something that I had always considered, going through with and finishing. So that kind of gave me the real impetus to go through, and I started taking a class every semester. That got my kid into the SUNY Potsdam childcare, and B, it gave me another opportunity if I wanted a career change down the road, or if I wanted to go in a different direction with music, more a music tech kind of idea. And I just really enjoyed doing the classes. It was stuff that really interested me, and so ended up kind of baby walking through that degree. It took a few years to finish it off, but I'm glad I did it. There have been a couple of times where I've almost taken other positions in the tech area, but ended up liking where I am doing my band things. So, but yeah, still a lot of tech, and a lot of tech that we do in band as well now. I do a music technology class. I do we call it SALT, which is stage and light technology, where we, everything's digital, everything's networked now. So our audio mixer is networked to computers. We have, IP cameras in the auditorium. We have our light board that Jacob's been running for our show. And so, yeah, it dovetails. I think music and tech dovetails very nicely.
Well, so the very beginning of that story was very similar to why I chose EdTech, because I looked at all the other master's programs. And I was like, all these classes sound super boring.
Yeah,
but then these classes weren't. Uh, you mentioned that technology and music class, which is a class that I took
Hmm.
in whatever version that would have been, however long ago that was. I don't remember the SALT class.
That's a newer one
As I
since we
say, I
have
don't
the
remember
new.
that.
Yeah, we had a technology upgrade in the auditorium a few years
Yep.
ago, and so we need to. I'm a big proponent of teaching kids how to use the tech and getting their hands dirty with it. And we try and take a field trip with whatever elective classes we're doing every year. Me and the vocal music teacher who does like a songwriting class or history of American music class, and we try and go over to Crane, or we used to go over to North Country Public Radio, or we've gone over to St. Lawrence and gotten our hands wet in the studios there, um, and worked with the technology there. And I always love to talk to the kids and and say this is a thing you can do as a job. You can be a lighting engineer. You can be an audio engineer. You can be a recording engineer. Um, you can do digital media. There's just so many ways that you can take a love of tech and a love of the arts and kind of marry those together. So
Yep. So in that class, like, how would you structure the learning experience when you were first building it? How did you like decide this is what they're going to do in
the
order? And
music class, the first project was always rip a CD, uh, and and then it was one of the ones that I don't know if we did this in your class, but it was we would make a commercial. So
yep, I remember that.
they would invent their own or use a real product or an invented product, and I'm sure I still have some of those saved away on an archive online somewhere, because they really came up with some creative projects. And it would have simple things like you need to come up with a opening music and a closing music, and some bed music. And then I wanted, it was very specific. It had to be 30 seconds, not 31, not 29. It had to be 30. It had to have a sort of a narrator, spokesperson kind of voice that came out of the center channel. This was audio only. And you needed some sort of conversation between people that were pan left and right. Simple things. And it wasn't so much about making the commercial, it was about learning to use the tool. So we would use something like Audacity, which is a free open source audio tool. And what did we use back in the day? I'm sure it was still Audacity back then. So yeah, that was usually one of our first ones. I'm trying to remember back to some of the other projects
I was just thinking that unlocked a memory for me. I remember doing that commercial because part of it also had to be like you had to speed up audio or like drop the audio to be that, because I remember that because that was my part that I recorded and then I had to speed it up. I remember that much.
Yeah.
I don't know what else we did.
Trying to think of some of the other projects back then. We would, now we'll record the if there's a songwriting class or an acting class or something like going, we'll record that. As you can see now, this is our podcast studio that we have at Parrishville Hopkinton, which we are really lucky to be funded for a few years ago from the school. We came up with a proposal and a class to do it, and so we have the nice Rodecaster Pro 2 mixer. Yeah, it's too many cables. It's a bit of a mess in here right now, but 4 really nice Shure microphones on booms and headsets. So that all came together, and so I have one of the class that is essentially that music tech class from back in the day is now we record the morning announcements. We have a group of students, and they're pretty well. They run themselves. So I just email them any announcements I get from teachers or staff. And they pull up the lunch menu for the day and sports that are going on that week and any other announcements that need to go out. And they've actually composed their own theme music and band lab that they do, and they make little variations of it for Halloween or Christmas or anything else that's going on.
Those are good.
Yeah. And so they put that out every day. It's usually, a minute to 3 minutes, depending on how many announcements we need to put in there. And it gets played over the PA every morning. And we go around, we try and involve as many kids recording as possible. So we'll have the little kindergartners come in here and record saying the pledge or the welcome announcement or the outro announcement. So we try and keep it as kid centric as possible.
That starts an argument in my room every time because I have 2 students who one is part of the podcasting and then the other recorded a pledge.
Uh-huh.
And anytime it's not his pledge, he goes, why wouldn't you go back to mine? Mine's perfect. So that little bit
Well,
starts a little bit of,
we'll have to mix it up then.
that's what I said. So if you were to say at the very end of the course, what do you want them to leave with? What skills from either the technology and music or the SALT class? What,
For right now.
for right now? Yeah.
I think digital literacy is huge, huge, huge. I think kids don't really um, investigate enough. They take what they see as word, and I don't think just kids. I think adults. I mean, you can turn on the news and find lies all day long, and people drink them right down. I think the other thing is just knowing that there are tools out there. I think one of the other things that kind of really got me into deep tech was not only lazy but cheap. So I'd have old hardware lying around. What can I do with this old computer? It doesn't run Windows. What was the one in 2001 called Windows Millennium? If you remember Windows Millennium. But so I had old machines lying around and old gear lying around, and that's what kind of got me into the Linux world. So Linux is my daily driver at home. I've gone through a lot of different versions, distros of Linux, and then open source tools. So, I love to show them like, this is the stuff you can do. I mean, we're recording on OBS right now, one of the greatest free softwares that we've ever put out. Audacity is like my go-to. I use it daily just for like basic audio tasks. And there's a ton of stuff like that. I use LibreOffice instead of Microsoft Word Office or anything like that. So and even getting into the Linux when I started building servers, Apache and PHP and MySQL, all this great open source software that does everything that you need it to do. And so that I want them to know what tools are out there, and that tools are out there to go and do the kind of things that you want to do. And I just want them to be able to not be scared of technology, to be able to know that you can go in there and fool with stuff. You're not going to break anything. You can always hit, Control N and start a new file or whatever the command is for it. But yeah, that's one of the things is the best. I think the best way to learn technology is to use it. And I think a lot of times, people would either read the manual. I mean, who does that? Or, or watch YouTube videos on how to do something, but really just get in there and work on it and see what you do. So I want them to be able to do real life tasks. I try and do anything I do, like with our podcasting class, we're doing real life tasks. This is something you could do as a job. You could make your own podcast at home. All you need is a cheap mixer. You don't even need a mixer if you only need one or two channels, and a halfway decent mic. And you can get USB mics now. These are USB mics. So,
these are
So they're not set up as USB right now, but you can just plug them in a computer and you get this great audio. So that's one of the things. Is it's not so much the specific tools and the specific skills, but just understanding technology and jumping into it and really trying to figure out what a tool will do for you.
Yeah, and I mean that's how we had this conversation before, but that's how I learned how to use OBS. Was I opened it and I had to do a thing with it, and I did it. Like I didn't watch any how-tos. I started clicking. I did whatever. If I broke it, I broke it. Like it's not going to break forever. You fix it, you do it, whatever.
Uninstall it, wipe it clean, and
as I say, then do it again. Nothing important in there. So what we see now. So if they're at the very end of the course, is there like a capstone project that they have? That can change, obviously, but like, is there anything like at the very end of the year, it's like, you should be doing this?
Well, it depends on our classes used to be only half a year for a semester. And that worked out well for like the music technology class, because we would usually try and set everything up for like our musical that we would do. So you might need to set up 20 mics and sound effect cues and a recording and being able to do it. And now we're adding streaming. So to be able to just have that whole project, I try and do things that are useful to the school, hands-on, and relevant. And so at the end of the course, I should be able to say to you, go go set up, a 4-channel mixer with mics and CD playback, or you know what I mean, but
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
some sort of media player playback. And they should understand the difference between a powered mixer and powered speakers, and don't put those together.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't do that.
Yeah. So those are the kind of things we go through. And a lot, the other tech origin story was when I first got here. There was a sound system down in my area, and when they had school dances, I just handed it out to kids to use the sound system that's kicking around my area for the dance. Well, I later found out that it wasn't my stuff, and I wasn't supposed to loan it out to people, which I thought was ridiculous because it's school gear.
It's school stuff.
So we created an AV club with the kids that wanted to DJ the dances. I mean, this is back around 2000, and we put together a plan, and we actually requested from all the other school groups around to donate some money to us for us to put together a sound system that would be able to be used for student groups. And literally, we still have that sound system here. We got a couple powered speakers. We got a dual CD player.
Oh,
I know, right?
And
And one of those
stop to switch those out.
One of those DJ mixers where you can like switch sources. And we had to learn how to use all the stuff, and we had to put it together. But for probably 10 years, that rig powered every school dance that happened around here.
I have to DJ a school dance on Saturday, actually, because somehow word has gotten around that I know tech stuff at my old district. Wasn't me that revealed that, but then they're like, "Hey, this was last year." They're like, "Oh, do you want to do a school dance?" I was like, "I guess."
Sure.
And then, lo and behold, I got a call again a couple weeks ago. "Hey, you want to do that school dance again?" I was like, "I guess." So,
yeah, that's the only problem with tech is everybody comes to you with their problems. Yeah,
that's the problem with tech. So if we flash back a little bit, back to when you first started, just to go back there a little bit, did you ever think technology would get to the level that we have today?
No. I mean, AI is just crazy right now. And obviously that's the next frontier. So we saw the explosion of the web and the .com boom and all that fun stuff. And that was really crazy and exciting to watch. The AI is as exciting because, again, it's a tool. So we need to learn how to use it responsibly. We need to learn how to use it effectively. And I do think there's a place for it. But I don't think it should be every place. Every app that I open now that wants to have its own AI agent running,
oh my gosh.
Or let Gemini, summarize your email. It's like, no, I don't need that. Yeah. There are some bigger things that I've been working on with that. My latest tech endeavors, I built my own home server that is doing a lot of different things, including DNS filtering and a lot of. But one of the fun, and this is just more for me to play with than anything else, is created my own AI agent at home. So I tired, I'm trying to keep my data as private as I can, because that's one of the things that these AI companies are doing is sucking up your data. And so I do have a self-hosted AI agent, which is actually pretty neat because the only one that knows what information is in there is me. And so I can pull that up when I really need something. And there are really nice uses for AI. I have 2 big lists of stuff and compare these lists and tell me what's missing from one from the other, or, just come up with a schedule for the next 2 weeks with this project that needs to complete steps A, B, C, and D. It kind of gives you a nice starting point anyway. It always needs a man in the middle. Well, that's a bad one with tech, but a human in the loop, I guess is the name. Is what they want to do. So.
I'll tell you what, AI is terrible at math.
Yeah.
If you ask it to make a math worksheet, because I'm trying to be quick, I'm like, I don't want to sit there and come up with 12 calculus problems for these. and then it gives you the most ridiculous problems. It's
Yeah.
like, this isn't even
Yeah.
what I told you to do. So AI is bad at math. So my job is secure.
And I love when it's just straight up wrong.
Oh yeah, it's not even
So
close sometimes.
I'll have I'll ask it about something, summarize something, an idea or something I want to know a little more about, and just give me a 1-page cheat sheet on it, and it will just spit out stuff where I'm like, no, I know that's just factually not even the case. So yeah, that's my big worry with AI too in the future is I think we're just going to be dumb monkeys to it and just let it be the truth that and we're going to get manipulated bad if we go down that road.
My biggest gripe is Google AI. When you type in a search and it tries to summarize what the answer is, and then it's just wrong. Like you could ask it something and it tells you this Google summary, but if you go and look, it's not that. But there's so many people in the world that are going to Google, see the AI summary, and just, oh, there's my answer.
Yeah.
Which
I try and get it to cite its sources as much as possible. So at least, if there's something in there that resonates, I can dive a little deeper right to the actual the primary source, I guess.
Yeah. What did I something a few weeks ago I was doing when I was trying to set up something at home, something with my laptop. I was like, oh, I wonder how you do this. AI is like, oh, use this site. And I clicked on it. It was not a real link. It was like, no, I got it from this source. And it's not even a real source. You made that up. So based on technology in the classroom, is there one technology tool, something that's been the biggest impact in your classroom?
That's a good question. I think
they should all be.
I think the online gradebook is big, because that really enhances, teacher, parent, student communication. It's a different form of communication, but, parent can look and see how little Timmy is doing in his geometry class or whatever he's taking at any point, and be more involved in it, as opposed to, I know when my kids were young, it'd be a lot of, hey, how's science class going? It's fine. Well, is it really?
Yeah.
And then the report card comes out and it may or may not be fine.
Not so fine.
But I think that's a good tool that we have now. I think we've lost some things. I think there's something good about handwriting notes. I think there's, and handwriting drafts for things even at times, or making outlines of things. I just feel like that there's still an efficiency to a pen and paper that you miss out on a lot. And I think it gives you a little deeper learning when you're writing something down as opposed to, just copy pasting a lot of times. I know back when I was doing, paper writing, back when I was doing my degrees, my workflow was, even though I was pretty tech savvy, was find the articles that you need for your sources, and then I would handwrite note cards and then take those note cards, and that would be how I'd kind of build my papers. And I almost feel like I'd be close to doing the same thing at this time.
Well, that just shows you how much I take for granted, because in my head, when I wrote that question, it's like, oh, maybe like recording something or something. But online grading was not something that crossed to my head, because in my head, I'm like, oh, grading's always been online. But obviously, that was wrong, and I knew that. But I never would have thought of that on my own. So do you think technology has changed how not only kids learn, but specifically learn music? Has it changed how they learn music in music class at all?
Yeah, the biggest thing, and for a musician, this is kind of a mind-blowing thing, especially an not older, I'm still young, right?
You're still young. You're good. You look young.
But you have the entirety of music in your pocket, right? I mean, if you have a Spotify subscription, you can listen, back in my day, you had, I remember having record albums when I was little, and the music you could listen to was what you heard on the radio or what was on a record album that you had or borrowed from a friend. I mean, that was all you couldn't go like, oh, I want to listen to the entire Beatles discography this weekend. You couldn't do it. Well, you could if you own the
Yeah,
Beatles
if you own the
discography,
Beatles discography.
which I did not. But that is one of the biggest things, you know. And then even just the sites that help kids out, the supplements, you know. I think the tech really helps with supplements. If you're a guitar player, pulling up chord charts,
Oh my gosh.
pulling up tab.
Basically how I learned how to play guitar.
Yeah,
Just pulling
exactly.
listen to a song. Oh, I want to learn that song. You pull it up.
Right. Yeah. The song that, you know, you had on your phone, and then you pull up the chords, and 10 minutes later you're playing along, you know. Now, back in my day, that also meant that you'd have to like sit down and listen to a tune, 20 or 30 tunes really deeply and try and figure it out by ear. So it's a different skill set. But there's an efficiency there, I think, with the tech.
Yeah. Something on that note, I'm slightly getting better at listening and being able to play, as I've now played music for a long, long time.
Yep.
But definitely the kids learning now, or back when I could not play by listening. I wouldn't be able to get it. Like, I had to look it up. So that's something.
Yeah.
My dad always says, well, if you heard a song on the radio, but you didn't catch the name of it, you got to sit by the radio and listen until they say the name of the song.
After albums came out, cassettes, and I remember, you know, you'd sit by the radio, and when the song that you liked came on, you'd hit record as quick as you could on your little boombox. And then I even remember, you know, I guess tech was always something. I remember tearing apart all my electronic equipment when I was young too. But I remember wanting to have tapes of the albums that I had, and I still remember I took the drawer out of my dresser and I put my speakers for my stereo system in there with my little boombox in it. So it was all in this enclosed space, and recorded my record albums like that, and made tapes of my record albums.
There you go. I feel like I remember that story. I think when I did a dry run for this and I was pretending to be you, I think I told that story.
Oh, did you? Did I tell you that?
You've told me that story before. I think that was one of the things I did.
That was CD ripping back in our day. Was turning it.
I'll have to check, but I think I did tell that story in the dry run testing. All right, closing us out for a little bit.
Sure.
One piece of advice you would give to new teachers today.
Embrace it and reject it. You know, find what works for you and get rid of the rest of the junk. You know, we have smart boards in our room now that have like its own basic ecosystem of apps and everything else, and it's just like, why do we need another way to skin a cat? Just if you need to do a presentation, just make some Google Slides or PowerPoint and put it up like that. You don't need to use this other presentation app that's built into the smart board. Find the tools that work for you and stick with them, and don't spend money if you need to. I mean, you know, teaching is a great profession. You're not going to get rich though. So save your money, and schools don't have a lot of money to go out and buy the latest, you know, we're not going to have a Pro Tools system here anytime soon, but you know, we'll have a Reaper system, and we've got some nice gear, and we'll have it all work.
And we've got OBS.
We've got OBS.
And last question.
Yeah.
One thing you would tell your younger self coming into teaching.
Whew. That's a good one. I don't know. What would I tell myself?
Look out for that student, Jacob Fisher. He's a troublemaker.
That'd be the first one.
That's the first one.
That you're going to enjoy the ride, and there's going to be, you know, a lot of ups and downs, but it's a worthwhile ride, and you'll be a little sad when you get to the end of it. So.
Well, thank you very much for joining me on this nice little podcast we had.
Yeah.
And that was Teaching Through Change.
Thank you.